Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sporting Fan Podcast. Today I'm talking about the season that's currently underway in the NRL. It's been quite an interesting season as, there's been some teams that have really stepped up to the plate that, a lot of people didn't see coming, and there's been other teams that are really fallen by the wayside that also a lot of people haven't did not see coming. I'll start from the top. Obviously, it was a team that a lot of people saw being up near the top of the table. The reigning back-to-back premiers, Panthers. They're currently in first place. Really, they're obviously the favourites to win the premiership this year. They're currently at $2.40 to win it. The only way I can really see them losing it is if they either have a really off day or it's in the wet. Because they've actually, of the 5 games they've lost this year, I believe 4 of them were in the wet. There's only one game that they've lost in dry weather. I believe that is correct. And they're going to be hard to beat. They're currently equal first, so they're first and 4 and against. But the team that's on the same amount of points as them is the Brisbane Broncos. So both the Panthers and the Broncos are both on 36 points, and I would say the Broncos and Warriors are the 2 teams that are most likely going to beat Penrith. The Broncos, a lot of people saw that they had a lot of good young juniors coming through the ranks, but they just, for the first couple of years there, for example, when Anthony Seibold was coach, they just weren't really firing. So a lot of people thought, they're going to be like the Panthers, where it took maybe take them a few years and then they'll eventually come through. It's just hard to say, say anything different about the Panthers, that is, that hasn't already been said. I just can't see anyone beating them, if it's dry weather. And like I said, the only teams I reckon could potentially beat them on grand final day is either the Broncos or the Warriors. Broncos, young team, like the Panthers, got a mixture of, but they've also got the few experienced players in there now, players like Adam Reynolds and that, who, been there, won a premiership, and that with, obviously, Adam Reynolds won one with South Sydney, so Brisbane have got the team to win it. I think Penrith, because they've been there and done it, I just think the Broncos are going to be. I think it's just too much for Brisbane this year. And I think it's the same with the Warriors. The Warriors have recruited quite well, so they've got blokes that have played in grand finals like Sean Johnson. They've also got other blokes who have been really strong players for a long time. Blokes like Adam Fanua-Blake, Nickel Clocks are at the back there. They've got a lot of players who are very strong players, and the Warriors have really been a surprise card off the season. So, a lot of people saying, should Kevy Walters be the Dally M Coach of the Year? Personally, I think it should be Andrew Webster, because just last year the Brisbane, I think, should have really made the finals. They really fell by the wayside in the last 6 or 7 rounds there, where they were coming fourth and they were flying high in that middle part of the season. They had a really slow start, absolutely crushed it, were beating nearly everybody in the middle part, and then they just all of a sudden fell by the wayside. But with so a lot of people said, the talent set is just, can they push out into the finals? Whereas the Warriors, it was no one really saw it coming, really. It would just look like they were going to be bottom half of the table again, because the Warriors were always the team that, they always had the ability to have that really top notch, good performance, so where they win a game and blow a team off the park. But the problem was that the following week, right? They always struggled to back up week after week, and really they haven't really been able to do that since they made the grand final in 2011, and even that year, they finished sixth, and so it wasn't, week after week they were backing it up. As I know they did make the grand final, so it's really been over 20 years since they've been able to do it, since the O2 team, where they've been able to do it week after week, and back it up. And yeah, I reckon the Warriors are the dark horse. They've been kind of flying under the radar. Like, everyone's been talking about Penrith, Brisbane, Melbourne being there and thereabouts. But yeah, the Warriors have kind of flown under the radar and slipped into third place. And not many, like, if you said at the start of the year, where do you your top four, I don't think anyone would have had the Warriors in their top four. I think, at best, people would have said they would have been coming maybe 7th or 8th. I don't see them making the finals, to be honest. So they, whatever Andrew Webster's done there, he's done a bloody good job to turn it around. They've recruited well, and that's where they are at the moment. Melbourne, who's currently in 4th place, teams, people have, at the start of the year, I reckon this was going to be the year that they really slipped down the ladder. I did say that I think they were going to miss the 8 entirely. Well, that's probably going to end up being wrong now, but they're probably going to still make the top 4, but they just still seem to be a bit off the pace. Look, they're actually third favourites to win the premiership this year. They've actually got better odds than the Warriors. The Warriors are at $13, the Melbourne Storm are at $7.50, but I just, they obviously you can never completely write them off, because they've got such a good team there with Munster and all that, but I just think it's going to be a very uphill battle for them. Obviously they've been there, done that, but it's just, I think they're a little bit behind the game at the moment. I just think, they're winning the games that they need to win, but to make the top 4. But I just can't see them beating either Brisbane or Penrith. And on their day, I think the Warriors will also beat them. I just think they've just been a little bit too inconsistent this year to make a run through the finals and win it. I just think that, they can get 2 or 3 good games under their belt, and then all of a sudden they come up against someone like Penrith and they get whacked. So I think that is what's going to happen. I think they're just going to be... I just can't see them, unfortunately, winning, or unfortunately for Melbourne supporters, I just can't see them winning the big final games. I just think they're just I just think they're a little bit behind Penrith and Brisbane and even the Warriors this year. I just can't see them winning it. With Cronulla, I don't know what's wrong with them, to be honest. They're very hit and miss. They seem to be struggling against top 8 teams. And yes, I know they beat South Sydney last night, who are in the top 8, but with the teams outside the top 8, they seem to win and win well, but I just can't. They're not winning to win a premiership. You need to win against the top teams, and they're just not doing it. I think they're making up the numbers this year, provided they make the finals. I think at best they'll make the second week of the finals. I can't see them going. I just can't see Cronulla making every year there seems to be a team that does from the bottom half of the eight that finishes between 5 and 8 that makes a bit of a run. They make the prelim or whatever it may be. I just can't see Cronulla being that team. I can't see them upsetting any of the top four. Then maybe if they get someone that's on an off night, maybe the Warriors, if they have, lack of experience and the experience gets to them. But I just can't see where Cronulla has an opening to make a run. I just think they're maybe one or two players short of making that. They just being that they don't have they don't have that massive impact front row or massive pack. The only real impact player they have is Nico Hines, but it's pretty easy to shut down after a while. Like if it's just one player, I think it's very easy to shut it down. Because he hasn't been as effective as he was in previous years. Nico Hines, unfortunately, I still think he's a great player. He's a fantastic player. I just can't for Cronulla. I just can't see him raising a premiership for them this year. Canberra Raiders, again, similar to the Sharkies, they've been very inconsistent this year. They've been very hot and cold. Some weeks they're on fire, and you just think that you just go, oh, here we go, they're on here, they're on. This is the spark. This is the they're gonna make a run here. And then they just run into a brick wall. The next week, basically what I was saying, the Warriors were in previous years, where they couldn't back it up week after week, is what basically what Cronulla are doing. I'm not Cronulla. Well, them too, but the Canberra Raiders, they just don't seem to be able to back their performances week after week. They might have maximum 2 weeks where they're good, and then they have 1 or 2 weeks where they just have massive come down. And I don't know if it's because Jack Whiten going to South Sydney next year. I don't know if it's because there's something else going. People are not responding to Ricky. I don't know if it's a combination of both of those plus a few other issues. Maybe it's the travel. They just seem off. Their for and against kind of suggests that as well. They're minus 78 on the for and against, so they've led in 78 more points this year than they scored. So it's just seen, and they're by far the worst for and against team in the top 8 so far, that are currently in the top 8. So I just can't see. They've also got the worst attack by. We'll put it like this, prior to their game today, their attackers, they've only scored 402 points. The next worst attack that in the top 8 is the Melbourne Storm, that have scored 472 points. So, and admittedly, Canberra are playing today, so they're obviously going to score more points than that, but they just backed up my point where they've just been too inconsistent. They've just not won games when they needed to. They just seem to be just struggling there. And they're just not winning the games that they need to win, unfortunately. And I think they're also going to have an early exit. I think at best they make second week of the finals if they're lucky. If that, otherwise, I can't again seeing them make a run. Newcastle, it's hard to get a gauge at where they're at. I know they've won their last 4 or 5 games, and it's just come out of nowhere because they were floundering. Their season only about up until 4 or 5 weeks ago looked like it was on life support, and it looked like they were going to be, Mad Monday was going to be they weren't going to make the 8 and they were going to have that Mad Monday after round 27 this year. But all of a sudden, they just have flicked a switch and gone have powered up the ladder, and it's kind of come from nowhere. Like, they've just started winning. And the style that they're playing is actually a very good style of footy. Like, they're scoring from everywhere, and obviously there's structure there, but it looks they're playing unstructured way. Like, the structure looks unstructured. It's hard to explain without, unless you're like a footy fan. It looks very razzle-dazzle and a lot of off-the-cuff footy. There's obviously, that's what they're training, and that's, they're playing that kind of off-the-cuff footy, and that's where they're starting to win games now, where I think in previous, it's just started to click, because, at the start of the year, their season was on life support, like I said, and you just thought, there's no way. Everyone thought there's no way, the way they're playing, that they're going to make the 8. Kalen Pong was playing 5'8". He was playing terribly. He was getting, knocked out for fun. It was just embarrassing. And then they finally saw the light, moved him back to fullback, and all of a sudden they've just turned everything around. And yeah, that's why they're there. That's why they're up in the top 8 now. Like, they're coming in 7th spot. And look, do I think Newcastle can win it? Personally, no. I don't think they can. I don't think they can beat Penrith. I don't think they can beat Brisbane. And I don't think they can beat the Warriors. But they're more than capable of causing a couple of upsets and shocking a few people in the final series. And that could be anything when it comes. Newcastle could be one that maybe makes a prelim final from the bottom half of the 8. Team that's in 8th place. This is going to sound like a bitter Rooster supporter, but I'm just going to state the reality of the situation here, right? And I'll get to the Roosters and proper review of the Roosters in a sec. But the Roosters, commentators have said, Roosters have been shit. They've been woeful. They can't. They can't win to save themselves. And in the same breath, they go, Souths have been fantastic. They're showing everyone how to play. Okay. Answer me this: why they only won? If Souths have been that great, they've been fantastic, blowing teams at the park, and the Roosters have been that shit. Why has Souths only one winner in front of the Roosters? Like, if they had been as dominant as what people make them out, what every single person has made them out to be, they shouldn't be in 8th position. They shouldn't be. They're equal. They're on the same amount of points as Parramatta and North Queensland. They are not playing well. They've been terrible. They've been they have been so inconsistent, and the fact that they've on the same amount, they've got better odds than the Warriors, so they're equal third favourites to win the comp this year with Melbourne. They're at $7.50 to win it, and they're in 8th place, and the Warriors are in 3rd, and yet they've got better odds. And my personal opinion is, obviously people are still putting money on them, and people are saying stuff, but I'm just like, it needs to be said, they are too inconsistent to win the comp this year. On their day, they can beat anybody. But they're like, one week they're blowing teams out the park, the next week they're getting blown off the park. Like, they're losing games that they shouldn't be losing. And they should have been in Cronulla on last night. They should, and they've lost to the Roosters early in the year. Who has supposedly been so shit. and yeah, they're like, I just can't see any shape or form where people are writing them on to win the premiership. I just think when they can string more than 2 games together, maybe, but they're running out of games to be able to do that. It's easy to beat up on teams that are down near the bottom of the table. It's like the big kid that bloody, it's like the big 10-year-old that's, half a head taller and outweighs every other kid by 20 or 30 kilos. Any idiot can do that, but it matters when you start playing against the top teams. And if you're getting blown off the park by them, which Souths are, they're just not deserving of that, I reckon, of that third place favourites. Put it in mind, let's keep in mind, the Rabbitohs attack is much better than the Roosters. The Roosters attack has only scored 350 points this season. It is the, second worst attack in the comp this year. But literally, the Souths have only conceded 14 less points than the Roosters. So it's that's just a comparison there, where people think, the Rabbitohs are, a strong chance of winning the comp. No, they're not. Honestly, they're not good. Then I can't see them beating any of the top 4 teams. I can't see them beating Melbourne. I can't see them beating the Warriors. I can't see them beating Brisbane. And I sure as hell can't see them beating Penrith. And I think if they play against any of those, it's going to be a bloodbath. It is going to be embarrassing. They're just going to get blown absolutely off the park. And let's say theoretically they make the second week of the final. Because they will finish in the bottom half of the ladder. They won't. They're not going to finish top 4, right? No one in that top 4 is going to be dropping out to the Rabbitohs. The Rabbitohs just don't have enough points, in my opinion, to make it into the top 4. If they somehow theoretically win, let's say for argument's sake, they don't get knocked out the first week of the finals, and they make it to the second week. So every week that the Souths will be playing, for those that don't know how the final systems work, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, 5 versus 8, 6 versus 7. Those top 4 teams, you win the first game, you go straight to the third week, and you get the second week off. And if you lose, you play in the second week. These bottom 4 teams, so the 5 versus 8, 5 versus 6 versus 7, so 5, 8, 6 versus 7. They're all every single week's elimination game for them. So if they somehow get past the first week, they don't get eliminated first week. Whether it be whoever that's against, whether it's Cronulla or Canberra or whoever, Newcastle. I just can't see, if they get past them in the first week, I can't see how they get past any of the top 4. I just can't see them doing it 3 weeks in a row, to be honest. Because let's say for argument's sake, they make it to the somehow by miraculous, Latrell Mitchell has a blind or whatever, they make it to the second week. Can you see them winning the third week? No, I can't. And let's say for argument's sake they do, then they would have to play week after week. They would have to play 3 of the top 4 teams. So they would have to play those 4 teams that I said at the start. So Penrith, Brisbane, Warriors, Storm. They'll have to play 3 of them to make it to the grand final. Then it's just too tiring for them. Because look at what a classic example of that is the Eels last year, right? They played Penrith in the first week of the finals. Tough, exhausting game, right? They just absolutely bashed each other in that game. But the Panthers won that game and made it through to the prelim. But then they had that week off, so they were able to rest up. Parramatta had to go the long way. I can't remember who they played in the second week of the finals, but they won the second week of the finals. Then they beat the Cowboys in Townsville, and so they had to do a lot of travelling. A lot of tough games. They came against Penrith, and they got whopped. Yeah, sure, they scored like 2 or 3 late tries at the end there, but the game was over by that point. It was like, by the time they scored, it was 28-0 with only about, 15 minutes to go or whatever it was. The game was over. It was, if it was a boxing game, if it was a boxing match, the referee would have, stopped the fight. He would have waved off the fight. It was just, Parramatta just couldn't stay with them, simply because they had so many tough games. It takes so much out of you, and I just can't see the Rabbitohs having to do that. Whoever they played in the first week, that's 4 weeks of the finals that they had to play. There's no rest for them. It's going to be hard, and I can't see them winning it. Parramatta, I don't know if it was a loss of the grand final. It was, and they had the hangover, physical hangover from it. But they've really slipped by the wayside. They're currently in 9th place, and that I didn't see coming. I think I could have sworn they would have definitely been in the top 8. They would have, at worst, maybe 6th, maybe 7th if they had a bad year. I just couldn't really see them really dropping down, and I think they've underestimated the loss of Sean Mahoney and Dylan Brown having obviously that off-field issue, which I won't go into because I don't know enough about it. And you can look that up yourself, but there's just been a lot of off-field. There's a few things that I think they've just been. I don't think they've done recruited too well. I think they needed to keep their spine together, and look, they're starting to come good now. Back into the season, they've won a few games, put themselves in contention. They're on the equal amount of points as South. The only reason why they're not in the 8 at the moment is South having a slightly superior for and against. But they had a team to really challenge, but I just think they've just lost a couple of players that have really, I think they underestimated what they meant to the team. And that's where I think they've really struggled, and they just haven't been able to recover. And same thing for the Cowboys. I think that prelim final that they lost to Parramatta, I just think that may have taken a lot of the wind out of their sails. Simply because, they prelim at home, they were thinking, oh yeah, great, and we're off to we should be off to the grand final next week. Parramatta's had a lot of tough games, and then Parramatta beat them in the prelim, and I think that disappointment carried into this season. I think both teams, it was just heartbreaking losses for them, and I just think both pair of them, they just haven't bounced back well, and that's why, as much as, yes, both of them are on equal amount of points as South, they're just, the Cowboys had 66 put on them by the Tigers. That'd be embarrassing enough if it was from Penrith, but the team running last, they put 66 on you. I don't know, only a few weeks later they put 70 on, what it was 72, 78 points, whatever it was, back on the Tigers only a few weeks later, but you can't have those kind of performances in you. Like, I just think they just look a little bit tired. I think maybe they're getting overcoached. Maybe it's slightly too intense. I don't know, but they look at both the Cowboys and the Eels. They just look flat. They just, like, last year they were able to have, both teams were able to have that extra gear. They were able to take it up a notch, but this year it just seems to be, if they're driving a manual, they seem to be stuck in between second and third gear, and they haven't been. They've been threatening to go, full throttle, but they've just never been able to really get the season started. Season started and really going. Same thing with the Seagulls, but to a lesser extent, they have basically what I was saying about the Warriors in years gone by. They're able to win one game. They have a really good, hard-fought win, but then they're not able to back it up. They just seem to be one or two great performances, and then it's followed by two or three performances. A classic example of this is actually the Roosters game last Thursday, because really the only way they got to within 16 they got to 16 points, not within 16. They got to 26-16 at full time was because the refereeing was really shithouse, to be honest. One of the Travojevic brothers should have been sin-bin for striking. For the people that watched the game, Nathan Brown hit Travojevic high and then he lashed out and hit him. Now, Nathan Brown got sent off. We can argue that till the cows come home. Like, should it have been just a penalty? Should it have been a sin-binning? Should it have been a send-off? Personally, I don't think it was. The way that they've refereed this year, my argument is, if it was a South player, or a Penrith player, or a Brisbane player, would it have been a send-off? The answer is no. So, my argument is, they only got back into the game with that decision. The Travojevic brothers should have been sin-binned as well. And, they only got really started playing properly after the send-off in the last 15 minutes. Before, the Roosters played a lot. They had enough opportunity. The Seagulls should have won that game. With the amount of bloody decisions that went their way, they should have won that game. And they just couldn't get over the line. They were just, without Tom Travojevic, they just looked flat. They, I know they got Jake and the other brother, other Travojevic brother there, but they can't seem to win without Tom. And they're probably the one club that relies on one player more than any other club. They just seem to be... They just don't know how to play without Tom there. Honestly, that's the thing. Your whole club shouldn't revolve around one player. You see the top clubs, yes, there's a bit of a dip. There's a bit of a dip if one of their best players goes out, but they go from firing to literally driving off a cliff. And look, I don't know how they change that. They need to have something because, to be honest, Tom Travojevic is too unreliable. His body's just too unreliable. He is injured too much, and if they're relying on one bloke that much, then especially an injury prone player as much as he is, as much as they are, they're never gonna be consistently successful, because all that's going to happen is that team. Well, they're basically going to do what happened in the prelim final a couple of years ago, in 2021, when Manly played the prelim. They just realised, can't remember who they played, but whoever they played, they just, in the prelim, they just were like, well, we'll shut down Tommy Turbo, and we'll win the game, and we'll not only beat them, we'll destroy them, and that's exactly what happened. They shut them down, and they just ran over the top of them and steamrolled the Seagulls, and they were never in that game. And yeah, and that's where the Seagulls are at the moment. Like, they need to have a plan B. Personally, I don't think Anthony Seibold is that good a coach. I think they made a mistake. It was proven at Brisbane that he had problems there, and he hasn't really changed much at the Seagulls. And then that leads me into the Roosters, who are in 12th position, and like I was saying earlier, they have been extremely poor this year. Like, people said that, like, a lot of experts said that they were, the Roosters were favourites to win the premiership this year. Personally, I didn't think they were ever going to win. I thought that they were going to perform a lot, but in saying that, I think they should not be coming in 12th position. They should be around the 3rd to maybe 5th or 6th. They should be making a run for the top 8. They should be well inside the top 8. They should not be, do I think they were ever going to beat Brisbane and Penrith in their current form? No, but, they shouldn't be coming in 12th position. They should not be, there's a lot of games this year that they have lost that they shouldn't have lost, and they just look lost at sea. Like, honestly, they, for example, they bought in Brandon Smith this year. Personally, I think he's he's a fantastic player, but I just don't think he's a hooker. I think he's a lot better suited to be playing lock. And he's more of a player that is a lock that can fill in a hooker rather than an out-and-out hooker. Because you look at teams like, you look at blokes like Appy Carousel and Damien Cook and these kind of players. I just don't think he's got that kind of dynamic ability to him. I think he does have the ball skills and that, and he's a very good ball runner, but his passing's not good enough, in my opinion. The game that I was mentioning just a minute ago against Manly, there was a lot of balls that hit the ground. There was a lot of slow service. There's been a lot of passes in behind players, passes going to their feet, and it's just really. It's probably one of the reasons why the Roosters have really stifled this year. They just have never got going. Because I think a lot of that is the service out of dummy half has been very ordinary, and I think Trent Robinson's taken too long to realise that. I think they need to look at more, Jake Turpin, for example, to play a little bit more, and maybe if you want to give him a break, put Brandon Smith in, but then don't give him week in, week out, starting long minutes. That's Brandon Smith. This is at hooker. I just think because it's just stifling their attack. And I know there's a slim chance that the Roosters are going to make the finals this year. They need to win all 4 games, but really, if they somehow miraculously win all 4 games, they beat, all the remaining teams and that they've got going. They've got I believe they've got the Dolphins, they've got the Tigers, they've got South Sydney, and they've got one other team. But if they somehow miraculously win all 4 games, are they going to make a run in the finals? I just can't see how they're going to, I can't see how they're going to make a long run. I think, they'll get knocked out first week, maximum second week. And, they're just, like, and that's because it ended up affecting their defense as well because, like, it's all good. They keep saying, "Oh, defense win matches." It's like, no, it doesn't. Like, attack wins matches. Like, if you're defending 60% of the times, 55 to 60% of the time every week in, week out, you don't have the ball. You might win the occasional game, but you're not going to beat the top teams. Like, you can't win without the ball, right? Like, you're not going to score points, and that's why the Roosters have got the second worst attack this year. They just can't seem to. They just look disjointed. They really look. They just look disjointed, and it's been really disappointing because, especially as a supporter, being a member, I had high hopes for them this year, and they've just fallen flat, and that's all I can say. Like, they just look like they're strangers to each other. Nothing's working. The other thing is they've got too many ball hogs in their team. Blokes like Joey Manu. It's like, pass the freaking ball, mate. Like, there's 12 other you got 12 teammates on the field. Like, pass the bloody ball, mate. So yeah, there's that, and then and that leads me into the Gold Coast Titans. Like, they're a team that, I don't know, they've never been able to really ever, since their inception in 07, they have never been able to win, consistently. They've never been able to be a team that really, week in, week out, really, year after year, being able to back things up. They're not, like, they've got a good team there. They've got blokes like Fafita, they've got Foreign, and, Brimson and that, but, like, I don't know, I don't know if it's the late chilled life, lifestyle in the Gold Coast, whereas everything's a bit casual, and, that has crept into the footy team, but they just seem to be, they just never seem to be able to back it up week after week, and because they're another team like the Seagulls and the Roosters that this season that they've had one or two good performances, and then they have two or three bad ones, and they haven't been able to back it up week after week after week, and that's why they find themselves in the situation that they are. Like, they sacked their coach, but it's just like, well, has that really improved things? And my opinion is, well, they were in 13th position when he got sacked, and they are in 13th position now. And I just think, can they, will they improve once Desi Haslam takes over next year? Like, Desi will bring in a certain amount of professionalism there, but I just can't see them improving a hell of a lot. Like, he got axed from Manly, admittedly in controversial circumstances, but do I see them, making waves next year? From what I've seen, they got nearly the same team as they got this year, and nothing's really changed, and I don't think Des will change that much. Like, I just can't see them moving up the ladder. The Dolphins, they're a team that's been... They were riding high. They had all these really strong... They're a really strong side. They came out of the blocks hard. They beat the Roosters round one. They were in the top four at one point, but then they've just run into a brick wall. They've just they peaked, and then they've got they've got a very experienced team, but with that experience, it's come with age, and it just seems like a lot of these older blokes have just got a little bit tired, and they just the wear and tear of week in and week out of footy it's caught up with them, and they've just run into a wall, and unfortunately for them, because they would have been if they made the 8, trust me, they would have been a great success story. New team into the competition, first year, in the 8, and a lot of people would have been cheering. Everyone would have been, what a great success story it has. But I just can't. Unfortunately, they've just, like I said, they've run into a wall, and they've just unable to maintain the momentum that they had in the first few weeks and keep it going. Because it would have been nice to see them, finish 7th or 8th. Look, they were never going to win it, but it would have been good to see them make the finals, so keep that momentum going that they had early in the season, and just, and they can carry it in. They would, they'll bring in probably a few new players year after year, and the juniors and that, they would come through, have a proper pathways. But yeah, look, I think it's probably going to be a couple of years before they're going to be established. Do I think that they're going to be successful? Yeah, I do. I think they're going to be a team that will eventually be a team. Do I think that they're going to be do I ever think they're going to overtake Brisbane as the number 1 team in Southeast Queensland? I don't think so, but you never say never, and they, just because I think that they're not going to be the dominant team doesn't mean don't think that they can have a couple of standout years and even win the comp. Do I think of course I think that they can win the comp. Any team can win the comp if they have a role on. Because people said that about the same thing about the Cowboys. Oh, they're never going to be a premiership force. They're never going to win it. They're always going all Queensland kids want to play for Brisbane. They don't want to play for North Queensland. They're always going to play second fiddle. They're never going to win. The best players always got best young juniors. The best young players always go to Brisbane. If they're a top Queensland talent, they're always going to play second fiddle. Then come 2015, the Cowboys win they made the grand final in 2005, lost to the West Tigers. Then they made it the grand final in 2015, and they won it. And who did they beat? They beat the Brisbane Broncos. I believe it's only either the second or the third time in all of rugby in NRL history since 1908 that there's been 2 non-Sydney teams in the grand final. The first being 2006, and then the next one obviously being that one. So I believe that's right. So of course the Dolphins, if they bring in a few players, of course they can get a roll on, and they can have a Cowboys 2015 type year where they make the grand final and win it. They definitely could do that, but I think it's just going to take them a few years for them to do it. I think it's going to take at least 3 or 4 years for them to be running it, to make the 8, and it's probably going to be at least 7 or 8 years, 10 years before that you can say they're a certified, bona fide top 4 team. They're going to, and be pushing for that grand final. I think it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a long period. The Bulldogs, they have really underperformed this year. They're a bit like the Roosters. I thought the Roosters were going to be pushing for the top 4 this year. I thought the Bulldogs were going to be in it around that bottom section of the 8. I thought they were going to be, between 7th and 10th this year. I really thought this was a year that they was going to start getting back on track from. They're going to be either they'll just make the 8 or just miss the 8. I don't know, they haven't clicked this year. I thought Serraldo would have really... It's been a really tell of the take here, like with coaches that have were assistants at Penrith, and gone on to become first year coaches this year. Daniel Serrato, was a big name at Penrith, the big name assistant, going to the Bulldogs, all these big recruits, and everyone thought this is the year the Bulldogs are going to start moving their way up the ladder. They're going to be up near they're going to be challenging for the 8. Big club as well. Bulldogs are a very big club, proud club. But they've just been stuck in the mud. Their season has never really got going. Like they've had a couple of good wins, but it's just it's like they're stuttering, right? There's just been no fluidity to the play. They've just been they've conceded the most amount of points this year out of any club. They've never been able to do a charge down and run. They've always done a bit of it. They've threatened it a couple of times where it looks like it's okay. Here we go. Improvement here, improvement this week. Yep, that's an improvement on last week, and then they capitulate. Then they get into bad habits. They fall back on their bad habits, and then they get hammered. And yeah, it's just been frustrating it'd be frustrating for a Bulldog supporter. And yeah, they just haven't been able to they've never been able to get going, unfortunately, for them. They've just been had a very poor season, and yeah, the reason why I say it's the take of two coaches that are in their first year is because, of course, the other one that came from Penrith is someone that I mentioned earlier in the podcast was Andrew Webster. Goes to the Warriors, unassuming. No one really spoke about him. Didn't have big raps. Wasn't someone in the media that everyone was talking that he's next big coach, next big assistant coach that's going to land a head coaching role. He's going to be the next super coach, because this is the thing that they always talk about in the media. Go, this guy's going to be the next super coach. This guy's the next cab of the rank. Like obviously Jason Riles is the one that everyone's talking about at the moment, but Serrato was the talk of the town, and going to the Bulldogs, he was going to be the saviour of the Bulldogs. Well, and Webster, everyone was like, is he really going to change the Warriors? They sack the coaches more often than they change their underwear. They're not going to do. The Warriors are going to best they're going to do is maybe 11th or 12th or something. They have an all right year. They might finish 10th, but they're not going to do any better than that. They're sitting third. Whereas the Bulldogs, they're currently in third last. Like everyone would, like if you said Serrato, Webster, Bulldogs, Warriors, which one's more likely to be coming third and which one's more likely to be coming third last, I think most people would be like, the Dogs are going to be the one that are in third place and the Warriors are third last, not the other way around. And which just shows how good of a job Webster's done. And I know Gus Gould's taken a lot of the heat off Serrato. He said, this year was always going to be a tough year. We're not going to have a good year. I think that's bullshit. I think they were expecting to be I think they were expecting to be challenging for the 8 this year. If you asked anyone if you had them off the record questioning where they thought they were going to be, they would not have said third last. They would have expected better than 15th. And really, I can't really see them finishing much higher than that. I don't know. if I don't even know if they're going to win any more games. To be honest, like I just think that they don't look like winning. That's the biggest problem. Like they just can't seem to get into games. Like they got beaten 66-0 against Newcastle in round 18. Like yes, like I was saying earlier, the Knights have turned things around, but to the tune of 66-0, they should not be getting bit. And I know that a lot of people say, "Oh, Vili Army Kikau's been out for a long time," but they've still got a reasonably good side. Like they got Sean Mahoney there and all that, and like they should be doing better than what they're doing. And they got in round 20. The next game is in round 24 against. They're playing Newcastle again, so it's the second time in 6 rounds that they're playing them, and I just can't see how they're going to get themselves out of that hole. I can't see them beating Newcastle there, unfortunately. I think that's going to be a big hiding. I can't see them beating Canberra, and to be honest, I can't see them beating the Sea Eagles. And I can't see them beating Canberra. I think they're going to have 4 straight losses to end the year. I just can't see how they're going to dig themselves out of this, unfortunately. And same thing goes for the Dragons. They've had a couple of good wins. Like they beat the Roosters and that, but there again, I think they're a club that just. I'm just going to join the Dragons and West Tigers into one here. Both clubs are poorly run, to be honest. Merger clubs, they've always fallen flat on their face. They had the Northern Eagles, of course. Like a lot of people probably don't even remember the Northern Eagles, to be honest. But they only lasted either 2 or 3 years. At the start of the century, it was a merger club between the North Sydney Bears and the Manly Sea Eagles. They merged in 2000, and either by 2002 or 2003, Manly decided to go it alone, and so it only lasted 2 or 3 seasons. And then Manly went on their own, and they've ended up winning 2 premierships since then. They won in 2008 and 2011. North Sydney went back to. They unfortunately got demoted. They're now playing in the New South Wales Cup, which is a shame considering they're a foundation club. But these things kind of happen. But the same thing happens to the Dragons in the West. There just seems to be too many voices, too much infighting. One club, because of course the Dragons merged with Illawarra and West merged with Balmain. And people go, oh, but, both the West Tigers and St. George, they both won premierships. St. George made the 99 grand final as well, the first year of the merger, but and St. George had a lot of success at the start of the they had a lot of good years at the start of the for 7 or 8 years there, but it was like in the early 2000s. But the fact of the matter is, I dispute that they had about 1 or 2 good years. They should have had 7 or 8 good years, but they only had 1 or 2 good years. At the start, and then they had 2009, 2010, 2011 when Bennett was there. But since then, what have they done? I think they've only made the finals once or twice since then. And they've just been pathetic since. The West Tigers have made the finals 3 times in 23 years. This is the 24th year of the merger, and they made the finals 3 times. Yes, they won a comp in that time, but what have they done since? Both clubs are poorly run. They just, you hear all the time that they're there's infighting there. There's blokes that are just not. You're never going to win a comp when you got infight. For starters, the Tigers, they've got Pascoe. They're gonna the West Tigers are gonna end with back-to-back wooden spoons. The Dragons, to be honest, have not been any better than they've only been slightly better than the West Tigers this year. And they're just Pascoe got sacked from Penrith. They've turned around, and West Tigers go, that he seems like a good bloke to pick up. Penrith were a basket case when he was running it. Let's pick him up. And St George is not much better. Both clubs are just. And personally, I think they need to go it alone. I know it means unfortunately, probably Illawarra will be gobbled up. Their club will probably go down, but I think they're going to go down. Unfortunately, they'll probably get either dissolved or put down into New South Wales Cup. And personally, I think the West Tigers, one of those two clubs, need to go it alone as well. Unfortunately, I think it's probably going to be Balmain. The Balmain Tigers, I think you'll probably find that the Magpies will go it alone. They'll stay up in the comp because it's just Balmain. Currently, if you said that a few years ago, you would have been laughed at. But Balmain was a club with all the money and West were broke. But now it's the other way around, with West having all the money and Balmain are broke. So unfortunately, I think if it was to split, the Balmain Tigers are going to go to out, and West will revert back to the Magpies. And I think that's it. And look, that's not going to solve all the issues, but I think what they need is they need to go it alone, because with the merger clubs, you have too many voices involved, and when you get too many voices involved, that's when you don't have a united front going forward. And the other problem is that they just need to clean out of management. Both clubs have sacked coaches. They've sacked, they've sacked a few coaches, both clubs. But West Tigers more so than St George. But you can't keep sacking coaches year after year after year, and expecting a different result when the management is terrible. It's different if you have 5 or 6 good years and then you have 2 bad ones, and then you go, okay, maybe, for example, the Roosters, maybe it's, this is Trent Robinson's 11th season there, maybe they're just not, his voice is just not being heard, maybe his tactics are out of date, whatever it is, maybe that he's just not being heard at the Roosters. But for the Dragons, it's Dragons and Tigers, they just keep sacking coaches. And it's well, clearly that's not what the problem is. At some point you need to say, well, it's not the coach, it's the management. And I think that's what the problem is. Until they change that, they're not going to... unfortunately, I don't think our other club is going to have continued success. They might have 1 or 2 good years, but they're not going to have continued success year on year, unfortunately, for those supporters. As always, I'm interested to hear what you think. Am I being too harsh, too kind? Am I on the money? Let me know. I'm interested to hear what you think. And until next time, thank you very much.